Hi, and welcome to this presentation on readiness to vote. My name is Linda Hoff. As a representative of the League of Women Voters, I'm happy to guide you through this presentation that will review how to get registered, what kinds of elections we have, how to get prepared to vote, the process of voting, and things which you might need to know as a voter. As we begin, I want to remind you that the League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan political organization. We advocate for fair voting and access, educate voters on the ballot and their rights as voters, and we work to engage residents in their communities. We're going to begin and end with this very important website for any voter in Michigan. Using the Michigan Voter Information Center, people can check their registration status, including what precinct they are assigned and where they vote. If not registered, they can register online if they have a Michigan driver's license or state ID. They can also check the name and contact information of their local clerk, get information about working at the polls, absentee voting, and they can see what will be on their ballot in an upcoming election. Note, anyone who gets or renews a license or state ID after November 2019 will automatically be registered to vote unless they decline. If the person is not yet 18 years of age, they will automatically be registered upon their 18th birthday. If you received your state personal ID or driver's license before November of 2019, you still need to register yourself. It's easy enough to do through the Michigan Voter Information website with your state-issued ID. Studies show that a growing number of young people are opting not to get a driver's license. That personal choice is yours to make. However, having some form of current identification is important to every adult. Michigan will process a state identification card for any person from birth through their senior years, and just like your driver's license, it's good for 4 years. If the applicant is a recipient of public assistance, there's a good chance that the $10 fee will be waived for the identification. For more information on that, go to michigan.gov/SOS. Keep in mind, a state-issued ID is your passport to many adult actions, requirements, and privileges, including banking and financial transactions, receiving non-emergency medical care, flying domestically or entering a federal building after October 1st, you'll need to meet the federal mandate of having a real ID compliant identification. This is a copy of the paper voter registration application. Before automatic and online voter registration, this was what you had to use to get registered to vote. It's still in place for those people, especially who don't have those state IDs. Note that this is a legal document and you must be honest and truthful in all your answers. If you're using a paper form to register, be sure to use only standard blue or black ink. Be sure to write legibly, as the stranger will likely be entering your information into the state's qualified voter file known as the QVF. Be sure to sign and date your application attesting that you answered truthfully. Keep in mind that your signature will be used as a reference to future election-related documents, for instance, an absent voter application. We're going to walk through the form very quickly just so you're familiar with it. So at the very top of the form is a gray area where you have to declare your citizenship, that you are a U.S. citizen and that you will be 18 before an election. That's the area that, in our experience, most applicants fail to complete. Below that are 13 boxes for your state ID or driver's license to be entered into. If you don't have one of those, you can enter the last 4 digits of your social security number. And if you don't know that, you can check the box that says you don't have those. Note, anyone 17 and a half years of age or older can complete this paper application. In the personal information section of the paper form, anything marked with an asterisk must be completed. Note that there are 2 places for an address. The second is used only if you have a mailing address that's different from where you live. In Michigan, homeless people can also register to vote. Under address, they would put a location where they typically stay, even if it's simply cross streets. They do need to have a mailing address where they can receive mail, in particular their voter registration card that proves they're registered to vote. Often it's the address of a family member or friend. Sometimes it's a church or a shelter. At the bottom of the section, you can put that address that's different from where you live. That would typically be used for people who have like a post office box. The bottom of the form is where the applicant signs the information, their form, and says that the information they put in was true. Again, it must be signed in standard blue or black ink. Keep in mind the signature will be kept on file for future use, especially in comparing signatures for an absent ballot application or your absentee ballot itself. If it's close to Election Day, we recommend that the applicant try to register in person with their local clerk. Per Michigan law, a new voter may register up to and including Election Day, but if they do not have a state-issued ID with their current address, they must provide proof of identity and that they have been resident for at least 30 days prior to Election Day. In Michigan, citizens vote where their license or state ID says they reside. A change in either the voter registration or the ID initiates a change in the other. Changing an address is very easy to do online through the Michigan Express SOS website. That can be found at michigan.gov/SOS. Note, people can only legally change their own address. It's against the law to change somebody else's address. A name change, however, requires an in-person visit at your local Secretary of State office with documentation of both names. When the voter registration application is processed, you should expect to receive a voter registration card in the mail within a couple of weeks of registration or the week of your birthday from your local clerk. From your voter registration card might look different from this example, but it will have your name, address, voting precinct, location, and representative districts. It's not required to bring your card with you when you vote, but it's a good idea to take it with you, especially your first time voting. When your registration card arrives, be sure to check that your personal information is correct. If there are any errors, be sure to contact your local clerk right away to get the registration corrected. If you lose your registration card, you may contact your clerk to request a replacement. If you've not received your card within a couple weeks of registering, check the Michigan Voter Information Center website at michigan.gov/vote, where you can check it online. If it does not reflect that you are a registered voter, please contact your local clerk to inquire. Michigan typically has 3 scheduled elections per year. These are scheduled for the first Tuesday following the first Monday of the month. See the images on the right. So you'll notice that in November of 2016, the first Tuesday of the month was on the 1st, but it didn't follow the first Monday. So Election Day was November 8th. This year, November 2020, Election Day will be on Tuesday the 3rd, following the first Monday of the month. The May election is typically reserved for school or municipal proposals. This one is typically the least participated in by voters. The August election is the partisan primary, where we choose from multiple candidates within the same party who are vying for the same seat. Because the purpose of the primary is to choose the candidates that will represent a particular party in the general election, voters must choose which party they want to vote within. Voters may not split their ticket by crossing over from one party to another. Doing so would spoil your ballot and result in the need to complete a new ballot. The November election is the general election. This is when we choose from single candidates from different parties for a single seat. In this election, you may either vote straight ticket or vote individually on every race. Every 4th March, we have a presidential primary where we vote for the candidate to represent a particular party in the presidential election. Special elections occur when an office becomes unexpectedly vacant and the benefit of a special election supersedes that of leaving the office vacant. There are 2 main websites we encourage voters to go for information to prepare themselves to vote. The first is the Michigan Voter Information Center website, where voters can see what will be on their ballot, check their registration status, their voting precinct number and location, get their clerk's contact information, and more. The second is the League of Women Voters online voter guide, vote411.org. The League's goal is to help voters make well-informed choices at the polls. Because we believe that public servants should be good role models for society, we require all responses to be civil. This is the opening page you'll see right now when you go to vote411.org. It goes live 30 to 40 days before an election, and you can check many of the same things through Vote 411 that you can check with the state's website, but the League offers what we consider a key advantage. In Vote 411, the League invites candidates to share information that we think helps voters better know the candidate, thereby helping them determine to what extent they feel the candidate will represent them. The service is free to candidates, and where there is an active league, that league covers the area. For instance, the National League covers presidential candidates. At the state level, all state-level offices are covered, even in locations that we do not have chapters. At the local level, the local chapter, if there is one, determines what races to cover. As you can see, it's a very useful site to help you be an informed voter. Additionally, in years where the ballot is long and you might not remember all your selections, as you complete the ballot review in Vote 411, you can print a copy of the choices so that you can take them to the polls with you. You can also email a copy to yourself. Now that you know about registering to vote, how to educate yourself on candidates, and when elections are scheduled, you're prepared to go to the polls. Polls are scheduled to be open from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. in Michigan. If you get in line before 8 p.m., your poll must stay open until all voters have had the opportunity to vote. Sadly, in some areas of the country, clerks have been known to eliminate voting precincts, often in minority and low socioeconomic areas. This is a form of voter disenfranchisement because many people do not have flexibility in their schedule that allows them to wait long lines to vote. When a voter shows up to vote, they must first complete an application to vote form. The name and address should be entered as they are depicted on the person's state identification or driver's license. In Michigan, a photo ID is required to vote. The ID used must be current unless it's a Michigan ID or driver's license. Keep in mind, you must look like your picture or be prepared with other identifying information with your name and address. For example, bank statements, lease statements, utility bills. As mentioned earlier, it's optimal for every adult to keep an unexpired identification. When going to vote, there's an allowance if a voter presents themselves without their identification. Voters who do not have their state-approved identification when arriving to vote have a legal right to sign an affidavit affirming that they are not in possession of their mandated photo identification and that they still wish to vote. Note, if a voter says if they have an ID but do not want to produce it, they will not be allowed to sign the affidavit because they would be swearing to a lie. In such an instance, the voter will not be allowed to vote until they present the ID they previously admitted they had. You can help prevent problems at the polls by checking your registration status online prior to Election Day through the Michigan Voter Information Center or the League's vote411.org site. You can also help yourself by making sure you have a Michigan-issued identification. However, human systems sometimes have problems, so it's important to have methods to address issues when they arise. Regardless of the reason, provisional ballots are the mechanism for voters who arrive at the polls on Election Day and find that their eligibility to vote is uncertain. Any person who believes they should be a registered voter at a particular precinct but do not appear in the qualified voter file should be allowed a provisional ballot. That's your right. The process of issuing a provisional ballot requires an investigation to determine if the voter's vote is to be counted. Plus, the issuance of a provisional ballot includes completion of a voter registration so the voter will not have problems in the future. Now that we have up to same-day voter registration, any person who does not show up on the QVF is allowed to go to their local clerk's office on Election Day and register to vote, thereby bypassing the investigation required in a provisional ballot. For some, transportation or timing might be an issue. The ultimate lesson here is that there is no reasonable reason why a person cannot vote and be counted on Election Day. Depending on the election, your ballot may have 3 separate sections. The partisan portion of the ballot allows voters to select from candidates by party affiliation or even non-affiliated candidates. The nonpartisan portion of your ballot allows you to choose from candidates for seats that are supposed to be immune from partisan influence, such as judges. The initiative section of your ballot is to vote for non-humans, for example, taxes or legislation that will apply to society. Initiatives can be local, countywide, or statewide. The purpose of a primary election is to narrow the field of candidates within a particular party. If only one candidate in a party has filed for candidacy, a primary is not needed for a voter, and a voter will not see that race until the November general election. When voting in a primary election, The voter cannot split their ticket, which is the practice of crossing over from one party to the next when marking the ballot. To help avoid mistakes, many clerks will prepare ballots that only include candidates from a particular party. In such an instance, the voter will be asked what party they wish to vote. In a general election, voters are free to vote their choices, regardless of party affiliation. If voters wish to vote a straight party ballot, they may do so, but they're not required to. Regardless of who they vote in the partisan section of the ballot, there's likely a nonpartisan section or an initiative section that does not apply to straight ticket voting. This graph from the Washington Post demonstrates the waves of straight ticket voting on the green line compared to split ticket voting on the orange line in presidential elections over 100 years from 1916 to 2016. You'll see that in the years from the late 60s to the late 1980s, they were about split even between straight ticket and split ticket, and then they diverged again. Michigan had straight party voting for 127 years before the 2016 legislature passed a bill eliminating it. As you saw in the previous slide, many people historically vote straight party ballots because of ideological similarities among the candidates and the ease of completing their ballot. Why is ease of completing the ballot important? Michigan is a state with a high percentage of elected offices. A survey by the MSU Extension Center calculated that over an 8-year period, Michigan voters cast their ballots for as many as 99 separate offices at the federal, state, county, and municipal levels. In general, longer ballots can create something called voter fatigue, which lends to people not completing their ballots or foregoing voting entirely. It's hoped that improved access to absentee ballot voting will help reduce the effect of voter fatigue and increase voter participation. In 2018, 70% of the voters who passed Prop 3 made straight party voting a constitutional right. Electioneering refers to campaigning for a particular candidate or initiative. It can be people, attire, signs, and more. It is illegal to participate in electioneering within 100 feet of a polling location. You might also see at the polls voter assist terminals. In fact, you should see these. These are machines designed to help persons with disabilities vote independently. They are required to be at every precinct location. These machines are designed for persons with disabilities, but any citizen may use them. Caution, they do take more time to complete. So if you want to try them, I would suggest doing so in an election that is very short. You'll also see digital scanners at the polls. These new tabulators were adopted relatively recently as part of an equipment modernization program across the state. More information will follow on these machines. Election inspectors are some of the people you'll see at the polls. They're your fellow citizens who apply through your local clerk to work at the elections. They are trained and paid for their long day of service to the community. You'll also see poll watchers. These are people that are there just to observe the activities and take notes. This is an activity that League of Women Voter volunteers are commonly recruited. The data collected is used for future advocacy in trying to help build better election systems. Challengers may only challenge voter status with good cause that a voter is not qualified to vote in a particular election. Challengers may never directly speak to voters as it is intimidating. Any challenge must be made directly to an election inspector. Challenges may be made for such things as the 30-day residency requirement or the age of a voter. Examples of causes that do not qualify include 1, that the voter does not have a photo ID, or 2, because the challenger has a belief or impression of ineligibility, especially as it relates to dress, language, perceived race, or need for assistance. Counties across Michigan updated their equipment in recent years as part of modernization investment. Genesee County adopted the HART digital scan tabulator to scan voter ballots. The tabulator scans the voter's completed ballot and alerts voters about any vote or ballot errors, such as overvotes, undervotes, blank ballots, and ambiguous marks. These would all be things that keep the full voice of the voter from being represented. If an error is detected, the machine will give an audible alert and show the error message for the voter to read, describing the error. In the event of an overvote, it means that the voter marked too many boxes for a specific office. For instance, when voting for a local trustee, voters will often be allowed to vote for more than one candidate. If, for instance, the ballot calls for voting for no more than 3 and the voter selected 4 candidates, it cannot assign those votes, so there's an error. At this point, the voter must determine if they want to ignore their votes for that office or spoil the ballot and vote a new ballot. On the other spectrum, an undervote is when a voter does not mark the allowable number of choices in a field. For instance, in 2016, many voters opted not to make a choice for president. Keep in mind, a non-vote is also a vote, just not productive. At all times, the voter's ballot should remain shielded from view by others. An inspector should be manning the tabulator and may be engaged to offer assistance. Remember, the ballot is not a test. You are not required to vote in every race. However, the down ballot offices can be very important to your local representation, and we would encourage you to at least check them out. A voter assist terminal is a machine that's designed to assist voters with special needs. It can be used on election day or even when voting by absentee ballot. The machine can read the ballot to a voter. It can enlarge the font. It can reverse the contrast color. It has braille buttons and more. The terminal walks the voter through the whole ballot while keeping the voter from overvoting and lets them know if they're undervoting. When the voter concludes, it marks the voter's ballot and prints the ballot so it's ready for processing by the digital scan tabulator. For your information, any voters may bring someone to assist them at the polls, provided it is not their employer or an agent of their employer. In the absence of bringing someone along to help, voters can also get assistance from election inspectors. In such an instance, 2 election inspectors, one representing each of the 2 major parties, will be assigned to work together. This is meant to ensure integrity of the assistance and protect the voter from undue partisan influence. This slide is simply to show accessories that can be used with the Verity Touch Writer Voting Assist Terminal. At any time you have a question about the ballot or the process, please ask for assistance. The election inspectors are trained to answer your questions. If after talking to someone you remain uncertain, you can ask to speak to a precinct supervisor or the clerk themselves. Too many young adults look at voting as if it's a test. No one will grade your performance, though they may frown upon any absence of voting. If you are unsure about how you might want to vote on an office or initiative, you can take the time to read through it carefully and contemplate your answers. Ultimately, you're not required to respond to every item on the ballot. However, those who are running for nonpartisan offices or have an initiative certainly think their candidacy is worthy of your consideration, especially as it is likely to have an effect on you. This is a good time to remind you that the League provides an online voter guide in vote411.org that can assist voters in understanding and planning for the decisions that will be on their ballot. Official assistance. Aside from your local clerk's office, these are a few official resources that can help with voting and election-related issues or questions. The Election Protection Group is there to quickly offer assistance on Election Day, in particular, legal assistance. Please keep this number handy in case you or someone you know needs help on Election Day. The extra numbers provide assistance in Spanish, Arabic, and Asian Pacific Islander languages. Advocacy Resources. These include election protection as part of their mission. The ACLU and Common Cause are 2 of the election protection groups that the League frequently partners with. In terms of education, there are a wide breadth of resources that we look to. So this is not by any means exhaustive, but these are sites that the League volunteers typically go to when studying for an initiative and to advance our knowledge. They would be the Brennan Center, the Citizens Research Council of Michigan, and the Brookings Institution. Thank you for your attention. I hope you learned some useful information. I hope you consider becoming not just a regular voter, but also an educated voter. If you have any specific questions, let us know and we'll do our best to assist you. Thank you.